I've been playing Path of Exile 1 for a few months, and in this video, I'm going to go through the biggest changes I see in Path of Exile 2 and what I'm looking forward to and what I'm not sure about. Let's start with my overall impression of Path of Exile 2. Now keep in mind, no one knows what the endgame of Path of Exile 2 will look like. First off, in November this year, Path of Exile 2 Early Access will be available. It's not even the full game. And then when the full game comes out, it's just going to be a foundation, like Path of Exile 1 would have been when it first released over a decade ago. So we don't know what the game will evolve into as new leagues are introduced. My first impression of Path of Exile 2 was that it was an isometric, Souls-like ARPG. Now, it doesn't mean it will actually be Souls-like. And we haven't even seen the endgame as I mentioned, but that was my impression. However, rather than keeping it so simple, let me go into detail on what I see are the biggest changes from Path of Exile 1 in Path of Exile 2 from a new player's perspective. But before I get into the changes, let's talk about the approach we should take. Most of us are going to try Path of Exile 2. I certainly am. There's too much guesswork to jump to assumptions now. We won't know until we play it and the game evolves. 2. Treat Path of Exile 2 like its own game. Remember, it's not an extension of Path of Exile 1. While that was the original intent, it has evolved into its own game, and GGG have said a dedicated development team will be maintaining Path of Exile 1. So, it sounds trivial, but it's an important distinction. If you have the mindset that Path of Exile 2 is a different game, you will play it with an open mind, you may stick to it, you may come back to Path of Exile 1, you may alternate in between, or who knows, you will be less emotionally attached to it, and you won't compare things like the speed of the game, which may not need comparison because they're entirely different games, and it's all about fit for purpose within each game. Thirdly, remember it's only early access which is available in November, and even at full release, it will be the same as Path of Exile 1 at full release. In other words, GGG will be making changes over time. Remember, it's GGG folks. To me, a solid game studio with a history of producing outstanding games can be trusted over time to give you a good game. So you may not like it initially, but regardless, you can have faith that over time, GGG will ensure it is a great game. So now to the differences of what I see Path of Exile 2 versus Path of Exile 1. Firstly, it's a new game. It's a chance to start fresh with a clean slate, clean up any mess. This applies across the game, but one good example is loot. GGG have said that they'll be dropping less but more meaningful loot, and I think this is the kind of opportunity they have when producing a new game. In terms of graphics, this is a huge one to me. They are more modern. The animations look incredible. The style is very memorable and creates a otherworldly atmosphere. And I think it really does look amazing. And let's be honest, it leaves Path of Exile 1 in the dust in terms of graphics. Now, another obvious thing is the much stronger emphasis on bossing and the campaign. There are 6 acts with at least 100 unique bosses. The bosses appear to be more difficult than Path of Exile 1. It seems like we're going to need a greater understanding of boss mechanics to survive. And boss life resets when you die, so you won't be able to just portal out and back into boss fights. This does make it look quite daunting, to be honest, and I'm not sure how this will play out. However, we'll have to wait and see. In terms of pace, the game appears slower and more deliberate. And in terms of controls, these are tied in with the pace. You have WASD movement, which I think is a huge plus, allowing far more precise controls. There's more focus on dodging and placement, with each class receiving their own dodging and rolling abilities. And of course, travel skills may be modified, so they don't overlap with these dodging and rolling abilities. Now, I think this is a good thing, and I'm looking forward to that in Path of Exile 2. The combination of playstyle, controls, and pace make for a much more deliberate, precise, and slower game, which may not be a bad thing. It's all about being fit for purpose, and I don't mind this change in Path of Exile 2. Now, a huge thing I noticed was the new classes. So Path of Exile 2 inherits the 6 existing classes in number 1 and adds an additional 6 classes. The new classes include the Warrior, Sorceress, Druid, Monk, Huntress, and Mercenary. Standouts for me. For the mercenary, you can shoot crossbows at different bases, like some will function like shotguns, some will function like rifles, or maybe even they look like machine guns. And they have different weapon attachments which modify them, and then different ammunition as well. Ammunition that can freeze or ignite, for example. And you can lob grenades. And so just this combination, first off, it definitely retains that Path of Exile complexity, which I love. But this character is also really unique, and I'm looking forward to playing a gun character in Path of Exile. I think it's a great distinction and a unique class. We have the monk with fast, agile movement and lots of damage over time. It just looks again to be quite a unique playstyle, and I'll definitely be giving this one a go. The druid, many people are interested in the druid, essentially a shapeshifter where you can shapeshift into varieties of animals, for example, a bear. And I really like that you can see how much rage you have by how much red glow your character has. This again is such a new playstyle and just provides that variety, and I think I'm really going to be interested in this one as well, eventually in Path of Exile 2. In terms of minion builds, that was also a standout. There are so many more minions to summon, like arsonists or snipers. There's more control over minions, you can move them around or instruct them to open doors and things like that. And you can summon any enemy in the game. Now, will this be absolutely any enemy? I don't know, but I wouldn't put it past GGG to make this super interesting, and that one is a great addition. So overall, the choice of minions and the control over them is looking better than ever. And rangers have mounts. That's all I say. You can ride mounts in Path of Exile 2. And we have to mention the extra dimension of gameplay introduced through the combination of attacks and modifiers in these classes. For example, with minions, you can combine poison and ignite it. And then with crossbows, combining fire with oil, which is flammable. It just reminds me of some of those surface or environmental effects from one of my all-time favorite games, Divinity Original Sin 2. It's not going to be the same, but it's a nice layer of depth to the game, and it's definitely a positive to me. And there will be 3 ascendancies for each class, for 36 in total. You won't be using the labyrinth to ascend, there'll be some other way to do this. In terms of the skill tree, there will be 1,500 passive skills, so don't worry, they have not done away with the famous or infamous skill tree complexity. There is a concept of dual specialization where skill trees may swap dynamically depending on what weapon you have equipped or what shape you've shifted into. And travel nodes now will be for any attribute, so for strength, dexterity, and intelligence. You can choose at the time of selecting the node or apparently even after. I have to say this one ticks the boxes for me because I can't tell you how many endless hours I've spent in Path of Exile 1 tinkering with gear, etc. to get the right attributes. This one's not just about the skill tree, but I'll mention it here. There's been talk about Path of Exile 2 showing you changes to stats, things like DPS or other changes depending on the choices you make. And this to me is a huge win if true, because it means you can easier understand the impact of choices you make, whether it's passive skills or gear, for example. Now, skill gems is another huge area. First off, they're no longer socketed in your items. They'll be socketed into your character, and you'll have space for 9 skill gems and what looks like to be 5 support gems for each of the 9. Socket colors are all white, meaning you don't have to match a particular color of a gem with the color of a socket anymore. Now, I'm actually unsure what to make of these changes. I quite like the complexity in Path of Exile 1 of making gems fit the right number of sockets in your gear, etc. However, saying that, we don't know exactly how it will play out until we try it, and there are other complexities to work through, things like dual skill trees and gems being equipable by attribute. For example, you can equip more strength gems if your strength is higher, so there will be a different interplay and relationship of gems to your character in the game, and we'll just have to see how it works. There are new gems, of course. There are 440 so far, with 240 being skill gems and 200 being support gems. Also, default weapon attacks can now be supported by skill gems. GGG have had to balance the game according to this, but can I say I am looking forward to this one. Now, last but not least, there is only one of each support gem equipable for your character. So you can't have 2 of the same support gem on different skills. I don't think this is a bad thing. This is going to force you to make some interesting choices. There are plenty of other changes I haven't covered. Let's just briefly mention some of them. There are changes to currency, the use of gold, simplifications of some defenses, for example, spell and attack block being merged together, which I think is a good thing. Local co-op will be supported. Love co-op. Much better cross-platform support. All of your MTX and stash tabs, where applicable, will transfer through. The audio and sound looks to be amazing. There's a new Spirit Reservation. And don't forget, Mage Blood, Headhunter, and the famous uniques will still be in the game. So let's wrap up. What am I looking forward to in the game? A fresh start, incredible graphics and animation, WASD controls, new character classes, Mercenary, Monk, even the new Warrior, Minions, the potential of not needing a build guide and being given space to build as you go. Now that is possible in Path of Exile 1, but it's not optimal. And an in-game preview to impacts of your choices. Things like how much DPS will be affected or other stats. Looking forward to that one. What am I uncertain about? The difficulty, the bossing experience. Now, it may work out and some of you will love this. I know plenty of people who can't wait for this. However, I'm just saying I don't get excited about this, but I'll give it a go. What's nobody certain about? The end game. Nobody has seen it. So don't judge too early. Give Path of Exile 2 a go. See how it plays out. And remember guys, it will change over time.